But welcome everybody. I'm grateful to have you here joining us. This is as you I'm sure saw through the advertisement. This is a relatively new program that we put together about a year ago, and it is beginning to really gain traction, and for good reason. I think as we go through it, you'll understand the premise of it and why we felt motivated to form it because we want to continue at CSM to come alongside of our schools, particularly our smaller schools, where we have staffing and resource issues, right? Where we just can't wear all the hats all the time. And our budgets don't allow us to just hire people to fill voids where we identify needs. And so the goal of this program, I want to make sure that this is clear from the very beginning, is not to be one that you have to plan to budget in every year. The goal here is to allow you to be self-sustaining once we go through a process of training and coaching through this vocation, college and careers counseling program. So let me go ahead and advance tell you, I guess, a little bit about myself, just so that you have an idea of who I am. So I come from a background, almost 35 years in education, 25 in public, and worked as a superintendent. I worked as a principal for a lot of those years. At one point, took one of my schools to, it was a very highly competitive high school to get into. And we had achieved the rank at #1 in the US. So at that point already, I was learning a lot about the college admissions process. But I, be honest with you, at that time, never really was focused on anything other than that until I began raising my children to a place where I had to make decisions for them. And so with my children, it became a life study in real time, right? And so as I raised 6 kids, 6 very different outcomes, right? And so when they're now all adults, right? My babies are 24, and you look at that picture, and every one of them had a different journey. One is currently as a West Point graduate serving in the 82nd Airborne. I've got an elementary teacher, a middle school teacher. I got 2 that transferred after they started school. I've got 2 with master's degrees, one that did community college, and then went on, one that did Christian and then public. Like I've kind of seen it all just in my own household. And as I got to know their friends and their friends' parents and just started engaging in conversations, it just became more and more apparent that, gosh, we aren't doing a good enough job of meeting the kids where they are. And I don't mean that just in Christian education. I feel like in education in general, right? We have this we've kind of given this mindset, portrayed this mindset that college is the only path. And we as Christian educators, in particularly, need to be more focused on the child and who God's called them to be. And in that process, again, takes time, takes resources that a lot of our schools don't have. So that's where the emphasis really for the vocation, college, and careers came from. So with that said, I want to go ahead and begin to kind of answer this question, right? When we think about this question, my gosh, I mean, there's some of us even now that may have a hard time answering this question, right? You still say, "I'll let you know when I know what I want to be." It's a question we're continually evolving. And when a child's a child, and puberty and adolescence, it's an even more difficult question to answer. And so when we think about options, right? I mean, we certainly know that college is a great option for a lot of kids, but it's not the only option. And as we begin to think through about trades, and thank God we have mechanics and we have plumbers and electricians and beauticians and whatever else you want to identify that doesn't specifically require a college degree. We want to begin. You're going to see a quote here in a moment. We want to begin to recognize that those should be things kids aspire to as well. Not that those are second class or fallback options, but that those are things that they begin to identify. God's given them a passion or a talent to make a difference in that particular area. And so we want kids from an early age to understand that that that's a that's a good thing if they can identify that, and we want to help them along on that journey. And then, of course, there's the entrepreneur, right? I mean, we have so many kids with brilliant ideas, visionaries that just want to kind of roll up their sleeves and create. And so we've got kids on that trajectory. And then we've got, again, like my own son, and I'm sure many of you know someone who has a child in the service, and that not just military service, but public service and police and fire and EMTs and all these places that maybe aren't degree driven, but maybe certificate driven or some other requirements. And so that's another option. And ultimately, it comes to a point to a career, right? Something to be able to make a living and to support a family. And gosh, there's statistics, and we know this, but there's statistics that the average person changes jobs 12 times in their lifetime. That was in 2019, and that they stay with their employer for an average of 4 years. That was in 2022. I mean, those are alarming statistics. And the one that I think is even more alarming is that 27% of college graduates are working in a field that's related to their degrees. 1 out of 4. And again, my children being the case, 2 out of 6 are not in a field that they went to college for. So there is so much about not just the now, but the what's next and the what's down the road path that's all part of this discussion. And so we don't want our students our children to be figuring that out when they get there. We want them to be prepared for that as part of the journey. And that's what VCC is about. That's why we designed it. That's why we built it. So when we think about this idea of what you want to be, let's just think about what some of those obstacles are, right? So you've got uh, anxiety. I mean, no question about it, right? But when kids start thinking about and parents start thinking about it, it's easier to put it off. It's easier to just think, that's 3 years down the road. We'll get to it. And then next thing you know, you blink and it's there and you haven't done any preparation. And there's regret about time wasted that could have been spent on opportunities to prepare them better for what's next. And the what am I going to do with my life question, it's just so big. It's so big. And adolescent minds aren't really built to answer that question on their own. And they need their parents and they need their families, but they also need our schools. They need our schools to come alongside them in that. And so discerning that path is definitely not a one size fits all. And we know that there's got to be it's got to be individualized. We've got to know our students in order to be able to do that. So that's part of the process, right? And look, we know counselors do a phenomenal job with the capacity that they have, and again, in public schools, sometimes that load is hundreds of kids to one counselor. So one of the advantages sometimes we have in Christian schools is we have smaller ratios. The problem that we have is that we wear so many hats. And it's just not possible to be all things to all people. I myself, when I left public education, the first 2 Christian school jobs I had as a head of school and an upper school principal, I did this. I didn't have anyone else. And our kids had questions and they needed things answered, and there wasn't anybody. But before we even get into the details that'll follow later, I want you to understand that we are about preparing you to find that person that you have who's passionate about this. And it doesn't have to be a new hire. It can be somebody that already exists on your staff, somebody that just has a passion to help kids find that place. And we come alongside you and we help you build that program. And then we step away and say, God bless you. We're here for you if you need it, but you got it now. That's the goal of our program. That's what we are looking to do in coming alongside you with VCC. We also understand that there's a constant shift. The world is constantly changing. So we have to begin to prepare again, not just for what's the immediate next step, but what's the step after that? And what might be the step after that? Every plan A we have with a child should have a plan B already in the background. We got to know what might happen. If that doesn't work out, what else could we pivot to? That's part of what we call at CSM that personal learning journey. We want to make sure that students are discovering things about themselves and knowing what their options are as they walk through this process of high school and beyond. And we know it takes a lot of time and already mentioned, right? We know that schools have to come alongside and support, but we also think it's very important that this is less anonymous to the parent. We truly believe that this process has to involve parents, has to engage them so that they are that they own it and they are pleased with the school in the way that the school has kept them engaged in the process, and that turns into marketing and that turns into testimonials to praise you and your program and their school because of the individualized attention that the child gets and the engagement of the parent in the process. So those are just again some real important ideas to think about. For anybody who follows Mike Rowe, Mike, you know that he is all about careers and vocations. And one of the statements that he made was a great quote before he had released this cartoon video about what he called the college conundrum. But I think there's two parts of that highlighted phrase in there. It's well-intended parents, right? Parents, a lot of times they don't know that there's better options than college out there or other options that are acceptable. Especially international parents, oftentimes they just believe like the only thing there is college. And so it's our job, our place to help them understand that there's more to it than that, and there's more opportunity than that, and we want them to help them discover what that might be. But the other is the last part of that sentence, that we need to show kids that a skilled trade is a thing to aspire to. Right? We don't want them thinking that I want to be a mechanic. I want to be a farmer. I want to cut hair. We don't want them to think somehow that that's beneath them, that that's that they're leaving things on the table by doing that work. If that's what God has gifted them with and called them to do, then we want them to know that we're going to come alongside them and celebrate that. So that's an important piece for us as well to consider as we think about all the things that we're doing here as part of this program. So the objectives are pretty straightforward. I want to just again identify. We want to make sure that they are thinking about where God is leading them. And we want to prepare them exceptionally well. As Christian educators, we should not do anything that isn't better than what they're getting in a secular program. Right? We should be God's hand and feet here on earth for those students to come alongside them. And so we don't want them to leave and ever feel like we didn't do enough. So we want them to be exceptionally well prepared. That's our responsibility. We want to assure parents that they're well cared for. We want to make sure that parents know that this journey, we've got them. We're going to be there. You're going to be part of it, but we're going to take care of them. Oftentimes it becomes an afterthought. And students think, I think I want to apply to college and I think I want to, can you help me? Well, yeah, we can help you do that. But this is proactive and it starts at the very beginning. So for 4 years, this is a discussion, not just middle of junior year. Let's start having this conversation. So we want to make sure they know they're well cared for. And quite honestly, if you do this well, right, then the idea is this is something people are going to want to talk about. And this is a marketing tool for recruitment and retention as you start going through eighth graders thinking about what high school they're going to go to. And, look, a lot of our smaller Christian schools may not have as many academic options. They may not have sports as options or a lot of extracurricular activities. But if we're really about preparing them for life and for what's next, and we do this well, then this is a tool for recruitment and retention without question. So that's why we developed VCC. That's why we put this together. So so this is what's involved, right? The 3 terms. We want to just quickly define them and then break them down in a little bit more detail and then show you a model of what this could look like for your school. So vocation, right? I mean, vocation starts with that question. Who am I? Who has God created me to be? What am I drawn to in terms of what I want to be and what I want to do? That's vocation. And so we cannot talk about vocation without talking about God and the Holy Spirit and what kind of inspiration we're provided with along that road. So that's why this is not just college and careers. This is vocation, college and careers, because calling is a piece of this that we want to be sure that we are incorporating into all of the process from the beginning to the end. And then there's this college piece, right? Of course, college is a viable option for so many. But there are also different paths for college that we want to make sure that students are aware of. There's the traditional routes, but like one of mine who did community college first, like a couple of mine that started in one and transferred to another, there are different paths to completing a college education. So we want to make sure they know what all those options are. And again, not to think that somehow if I don't do this in 4 years, same school, same major, that there's something wrong with me, right? We want to be very clear about what those options are and what those possibilities are. And then career. I mean, again, earlier the statistic was 12. There's been a standard statistic over time that says at least 7 distinct careers. So we've got to be mindful again of not just the what's now, but what might be after that, and what am I using this for to prepare myself for what might be next. I may have to do this before I can do that. And so career is not just a what am I doing now for the rest of my life, but what am I doing now with what's next in mind? And that's all part of the process. So how do we do it? Right? How do we come along and support you? So again, let's start with the main idea. Faith guides us. That's what would make our program different than any obviously secular program that you'd find out there. It's got to be rooted in Christian principles. It's got to be biblical worldview in discussions. There's got to be scripture alignment. We want to make sure that everything that we do aligns with our Christian principles. That's the first piece, and that's always the first piece that we'll talk about. And then there's that personalized piece. Again, it is tailored to every single student individually. There is no blanket coverage that says all of you fit into this category, because even the college bound kids are not bound on the same trajectory. So we want to be mindful of that. We also want to be thinking about college. If college is in fact the plan, we want to have the resources and the support to help them match their academic interests, but also be mindful of all the other pieces that go into a college education and how well prepared would they be for all of those expectations about a social life, about living arrangements, about being able to defend your faith in the face of and trying to think of the right word, an antagonistic professor or colleague. So we want to be thinking about all of that as we prepare them for college. And then we have obviously the calling piece again. And so when we think about true calling, it comes down to that meaning, right? Yes, it's about making a living, but if there isn't a purpose in what they're doing and it isn't aligned with God's plan, then where is the meaning in what they're doing? And that's what so many people are missing, right? There's no purpose necessarily in what it is that they're doing. And so we want to make sure that we're having those conversations early on, because when we seek God in those questions, he will provide the answers for us. And so we want to help guide them in those discussions to figure out what that is. What is going to bring meaning into their life as they go into a career? And so there's that piece. And then, of course, as I've already mentioned, the partnering piece with parents is critical. We want them to be engaged with us. We want them to support, and we want to give them an opportunity to ask questions and, again, to feel like they are not on the outside getting snippets of information, but that they're actually right there where it's a three-way conversation, student, school, parent, as we move forward with the process. And last, just to emphasize again, this is marketable. I mean, large schools with huge ratios, or schools that don't have a program where they're individually focused on the child, they're at a disadvantage. You can distinctively market this as a special program that other schools aren't doing. And that can, again, particularly when you look at your eighth graders as you're recruiting them for high school, to be able to speak to a program like this and to have some of your students who have gone through it, who can share with parents and students how personal it is and how big a difference it made in directing their path. you have a tremendous marketing opportunity with that. So, so what could it actually look like? So we are contracted with 3 schools currently to do VCC, and this is just an example of one of them to give you an idea of what it could look like. And I say what it could look like because we'll talk about this later, but every school's different. Every school's needs are different. There may be some aspects where you're like, we do this pretty well, but we could use some help with this, or we need everything, or we need to group our kids together because we're so small and we don't want to do it individualized, or whatever it may be. And so we want you to be completely understand that this is not a one size fits all for all schools. So this is a model, but this may not be the model that ultimately works for you. And so you can see how this works. Now, we have noticed that in conversations, even as we're doing strategic plans with schools, we are noticing that we are essentially being invited to come in as soon as possible and begin working with current seniors. Now some schools have a counselor and someone who is committed to doing that work, and they're in a position where they've got that covered. But one of the first opportunities we're going to have working with one of our schools is to just come right in and actually start working with the seniors, because they just don't have the guidance currently of these conversations and what their options are. We never want to say it's too late. I mean, certainly having conversations in March of senior year is late, but it's not too late. It's better than not having the conversation at all. So we start that conversation, but then the second part of that is to begin to build the foundation of the program, where ideally a 3-day on-site modeling program for whoever this individual is that you determine would be the best fit to be your VCC counselor, where our counselor would come in and would model small group sessions with multiple grade levels, full class sessions with parents, individual meetings with college bound kids, with trade bound, vocational bound kids, uh, an opportunity to be on site modeling, debriefing, and developing a handbook that would be a guide from 9th grade to 12th grade of what this would look like. Because once again, our goal is come alongside you, build it, and then step away, and then it's all yours. And so the second year then becomes that come alongside coaching, right? When the idea would be, yeah, we'd be in person at first to model, but the coaching is as simple as you're running a small group session and you open up a Zoom and our coach is right there listening in, taking notes, debriefing, offering some insights into what went well, what could be improved, asking questions about challenges that you're facing. And that environment, is maintained until the end, where you would be able to say, we've done this now. We've been together for 2 years, modeled the program, handbook is set. We're good to go. We got it from here. That's the nature of our program. And so when you think about what does that entail, well, you have some generic topics that kind of, overlap all 4 years. But then there are some topics that are very specific to which year students are in. So if we're talking about freshman year, there are going to be some topics that are going to be very different than what they're going to get in their junior year or their senior year. So again, while this is a model, this is a kind of a generic picture, your school may be driven a little differently. There may be some things you do sooner, some things you do later, and that would all become part of the conversation that would lead to the development of that handbook that becomes yours, and that becomes your guide from there on out, and to tweak and adapt as your school grows. So in addition to the coaching and the pieces that go along with that, there would be other resources, and those resources are available to you to use or not use. There are many out there. Some of the ones that we recommend. I happen to be a very big proponent of SCORE. Now there are others. Naviance is one of the most popular. Naviance is very expensive. SCORE will cost you about $250 to set up. and then about $2.50 per student. I mean, the cost is unbelievable in terms of what you get, and they are continuing to expand the resources, and the costs are not significantly increasing. So Scorer becomes kind of your hub for so much of the career and college searching and maintaining, where you're talking about teacher recommendations and self assessments and all kind of housed in one location with Score. So that would be one resource, and we build that into the cost of the program because that's how much we believe. Another thing to consider with a lot of other resources is the faith alignment. They're not aligned to faith, but they're not faith averse either, where some others may incorporate some content that you would find disturbing to your community, or your community would find disturbing. So have to be mindful of that as you find your resources. Commonapp.org is for your college bound kids, is going to be another tremendous resource with tremendous information. And one of the things that I even do in my private consulting is I point them to it, and then I want them to dive deep. And Common App has so many resources that will allow for a deep dive for a parent and a kid together to be able to come back and have a conversation with you or your representative. Say, what have you learned? What have you discovered? As opposed to, I got nothing. So we're and starting from scratch. So the resources allow you to kind of put it in their laps to begin to do their homework and bring that information into your conversations. Big Future at College Board is another resource for information like that. And then findyourchristiancollege.com is a great resource that is specifically focused on the diversity of Christian higher ed and the resources that are available there. So yeah, with our program, right, want to make sure you understand, again, what are the outcomes? What is it that we are anticipating? So the handbook is the first thing. The handbook becomes your guide. That becomes the script that you will follow and that you will be able to pass on if someone in that position moves on to another position. They've developed that alongside our counselor, but then it becomes yours. And you can adapt and tweak it as you need to over the years. But that's a product that's yours. We also, again, want you to realize that you're creating a biblically grounded, personalized program for students from 9th through 12th, and potentially you could roll it down into 7th and 8th grade as well. It could be something that you are thinking about. I want to at least start these conversations in 7th and 8th grade. And if that's something that you wanted to do, again, the program is completely personalized to what you want. The multi-layered approach is also, again, important. It's not one direction. We're just focused on college. We're just focused on this. There are several different directions that life can go, that preparation can go. And so we want to ultimately have that satisfaction at the end of our life, that it was a life well lived. And so we want to prepare and plan for that now, as opposed to just making shifts out of necessity. If we can begin the mindset now of, there are many different paths and we want to know about all of them and we want to prepare for all of them, that's something that would be an outcome of these conversations. And then parent satisfaction, no greater marketing tool than to have your parents going around and telling everybody about what you're doing and how impactful that's been. And so again, that becomes not only recruitment, but retention as well. 9th or 10th grader that might be thinking about going somewhere else, that sees the amount of time and effort that's been poured into 11th and 12th graders on this journey. It may just be a reason why they decide to stay, because of what you offer. Maybe, again, you don't offer as many AP classes as they could get somewhere else, but you're giving them a personalized journey on the way to their college and career outcomes. Students will appreciate that, and of course your staff will be involved as well, because it's a program that's collaborative. Everybody needs to be involved in the process. So what I want to show you next is just based on that program that I outlined earlier, which is a model of a program, I want to give you an idea of what investment it would be on your part as a school. And again, there's other factors that weigh in, but ultimately realize this is what we're referring to next is strictly about the program, about CSM's role in bringing this to you. The who question is a you question. If you have a staff member, again, that is, and maybe they're part-time and maybe they have a gift for connecting with adolescents, and you're thinking, boy, they would really be a good fit to take on this responsibility. That may be a stipended position that doesn't require a full-time salary. Perhaps you would be looking at a full-time salary. How you choose the who is entirely up to you. But the what, in terms of what we deliver, is what we would be referring to in this example. So the earlier example of the program that we were referring to, everything we do at CSM is based on your average tuition, right? We don't have a carte blanche. This is the cost for everyone. We tailor the costs to what you charge your students, and we adapt accordingly. So for a school, this particular school averages tuition K-12 at about 93.50. And then based on the number of hours that the three-tier program that we laid out earlier, this is a program that would cost you about 30 grand as a CSM member. And it becomes, again, remember, right? This becomes your program. So you could look at that as a budget item, perhaps spread out over 2.5 years, that then becomes your own program that you never have to budget for again, right? So the idea of the fee, again, just be mindful, right? Put student enrollment, average tuition, how many hours, right? All of that would be a variable. But just to give you an idea, if you saw that program earlier and thought, well, that program looks like that would work for us, this is approximately what you would see in terms of what it would cost to budget over time. And I will tell you that every strategic plan that certainly that I've been part of in the last year and a half, where this conversation has come up about the need for this, every school has adopted it, or at least it's been in their strategic plan, to where now, as I mentioned, 3 schools have now already committed to this. Starting, my first visit will be in March to go out to a school, followed by schools later in the spring and into the summer. It's a recognized enhancement to program that schools are looking for. And so we're blessed to be able to bring this opportunity to you. Just some other things to consider, and then I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Again, fully customizable. There is not a one template that fits everyone. So I want you to know that. And the on-site training, again, it's not only recommended, we're actually building that in as kind of an expectation for the start, because it would be really hard to maintain or develop relationships with students and parents if it's fully virtual. It's different if the initial kind of kickoff is an on-site, running meetings, running small groups, running individual sessions, because then the connection is there, and that culture support is there, the face-to-face is there. Then that makes the transition to a virtual environment better. But again, this can be fully virtual. It all depends on the needs of your school. Another piece is that I did say, we would hand it off to you at the end, but there's always the option of saying, our in-house coach is ready to go, but they're still a little uncomfortable doing this on their own. Could we continue the program for another year? Of course, we would be there, but we never want you to think that the goal is for you to have to be budgeting for this every year. Our goal is to hand this off to you when we complete the training and the modeling. And then the last piece is interesting, right? Because you're going to probably have parents who are going to say, I want more. And while you're going to be providing probably more than you ever have before, with the way that you're laying out this program from ninth grade to 12th grade, there may be parents who say, like, I want this for my child. I want to bring someone in from the outside privately. Well, the good news is you can feel comfortable being able to say, we're going to connect still with the same organization that's helping us do this training. They have an option for you to continue privately, but it completely takes it off of your hands. You as a school don't have to have anything to do with that. You can make the recommendation. You'll know you're tied to an organization that is on mission with you, but you don't have to waste more than just the time to pass along the contact information and let the parent take it from there. So those are other pieces to consider as you think about what else there might be to consider in the program.